Hello, everybody. Welcome to High Score 2022. My name is Angharad Yeo, or you can call me Rad. I get a cheer. That's nice. Yeah, good morning, everyone. We've got some energy in the room. Very good. Looking forward to it. I'm now going to introduce Emma, who's going to deliver us a welcome to country.
You can hear me? Oh, there we go. That's big energy to match on a first thing Saturday morning. That's great. Womanjika Wurundjeri Balak Yiman Kundibik, meaning welcome to the land of the Wurundjeri people. I am a proud Aboriginal woman. My tribe is Wurundjeri. My language is Woiwurrung. I would like to pay my respect to my and all ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm so grateful to be here today and welcome everyone to country. Country here being Naarm, Naarm meaning Melbourne. Thank you all very much for having me. I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.
I need to stop jumping on that stage because every time I do, it does a big thud. Thank you so much, Emma. It's such a privilege to have you come and give us that welcome to country. Now, I know we're all excited to be here. We heard that. It's early on a Saturday, but it doesn't matter because we're here for High Score 2022. And no word of a lie, this is going to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I promise you it's not. High Score is one of my favorite events in Melbourne's International Games Week. It's such a great resource for information if you're interested in anything to do with composition or sound design. So I'm really stoked that we've got a great turnout and you're all going to learn something, right? And then go home and make better music for games, which is one of my vested interests. I'm not going to do it, but I hope that you all do. But High Score would not be possible if it wasn't for our amazing sponsors. Creative Victoria, Melbourne International Games Week, Australian Council for the Arts, VMod and Music Market, FMod, Roland Cloud, and Yamaha. And we're also really lucky to be holding this event for the first time in LCI Melbourne, and also the first time in person in 2 years, which, oh, such a blessing. It's still really great to see some of you wearing masks. Please feel free to do so and just keep safe and keep as much distance as you can. Right now in LCI Melbourne, we are in the gallery space, but there are other spaces here as well. So we'll be here in the mornings and afternoons for sessions, and throughout the day, we'll be using the loft, which is up on level 2, and it will be mostly run by the very wonderful Jenny Maxwell. And then over in the studio, we've got Belinda Coombs, who'll be running our A&R sessions. If you've pre-booked a session with Arts Law, you can meet them over on level 1. And we've also got a chill room on level 1 that you can dip into any time that you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, want some quiet time, perhaps got to send an email. We've got that available for you. Now, there are toilets on every level. So on this level, I believe they're up to the back over there, and there's also a fire exit that way. Then on level 1, they're around to your left, and level 2, they're up and then just to your right. And there's also fire exits, which are signed throughout the venue. And then, of course, there's the main exit, which you all would have come in. It's right up there. You can even see it, because we've got a mezzanine. Morning tea, lunch, and afternoon tea will all be held on the level 1 kitchen/lounge area. If you do get lost at any point, we've got lovely staff members scattered throughout who can help you out. They are here to help. Bug them as much as you want, and maybe even scope out where that kitchen and lounge is so you don't miss out on morning tea, because I know it's my favorite part of the day. These days are absolutely jam-packed. We've got tons of very knowledgeable speakers, and we want you to get the most out of it. So High Score is a very interactive event. We've got Slido, which you can use to submit any questions that you have, whether you're here in person or online. And you can upvote questions that you like as well, and we'll use that to pick things to ask people at the end of the sessions or throughout panels. So there will be a Q&A time at the end of most talks. So if you've got anything that you want to know, please chuck that in Slido. You can also scan the QR code on the back of your lanyard to access the program. Now, we've got the live stream, as I mentioned, and that will be available for 30 days. past the end of this event. So if you're here in person, you've got access to that later, or if you're online, obviously you can do that too. So our live stream friends can catch any session that they like. There's no caps, but for the in-person attendees, unfortunately, physical capacity is a thing. So please only attend these sessions that you've registered for. It's now like, rad, I didn't think ahead and I haven't registered for like 4 sessions that I really want to see. Go and see our staff over at the registration table. They will do their best for you to get you in, but at the same time, some are booked out and unfortunately, we won't be able to. However, live stream. Just catch up on it later. Do it in your pajamas. What else? So, as you're moving around through the day, also please remember to take all of your belongings with you. You might not be coming back to the same room, and we would hate for you to lose your stuff, especially your little goodie bags, which I haven't gotten one yet, but I hear that there is a notebook and pen in there for you. So for all your note-taking needs, make sure that you take your stuff with you. And we would also love to see the event through your eyes via social media. So please be tagging APRA AMCOS and use the hashtag HighScore2020. And you can even add your own music to some Insta stories that you post. And then if APRA reposts those, free exposure, baby. Just film stuff around the place and then have your little ditty underneath. There you go. Finally, we want High Score to be an inviting and comfy and friendly space for everyone, so we do expect everyone to be kind to each other, which you're all going to be, right? There's no meanies in the crowd. Yeah, I'll be watching you. As per the APRA and MIG-Work codes of conduct that you've agreed to, we've got a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind, so if you're experiencing problems at any time, please go and chat to one of our lovely APRA staff or venue staff members, and they will be sure to help you out. Now, first session of the day, the thing that we're all here to hear, people smarter than me telling you things about music and sound design in games. So I would love to introduce now our opening keynote by Josie Brechner. She is an absolutely outstanding composer and sound designer. She's worked on titles such as Blossom Tales 2, Extreme Meat Punks Forever, and Freshly Frosted. And in this keynote, she's going to be using these as examples as she breaks down her process for creating compelling and emotionally driven game audio.
Mike? Oh, there we go. Okay, hi. I'm going to take off my mask, but I will be masking the rest of the day, and I encourage others to do the same. They asked if I wanted one of those Britney Spears style microphones, but I thought I'd go with I'm a stand-up comedian vibe. My name is Josie Brechner. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I'm really excited to see all your faces today. This talk is called Collaborating and Crafting Audio with Heart. When I pitched this talk idea, I didn't know what I wanted to talk about, so I thought it was nice and vague. This talk also features prints by Kathy G. Johnson, who's an American artist, printmaker, and they're really gorgeous, so you'll get to see some of Kathy's wonderful art as we go along. I'm going to figure out which hand I want to be in. I'm going to pre-open my water so I can drink. There we go. Without spilling it everywhere, okay. I want to say thanks to the amazing folks at APRA AMCOS and Cam and Rad and Kristen for all your amazing work in getting stuff together today. It shouldn't be as radical as it is to pay speakers at your audio events, but for some reason, the state of the industry we live in, it is kind of radical and cool. So I appreciate you all for putting artists and labor first. Okay, I gotta change my slides. These are some pictures of me. I do game music and other audio stuff. I was primarily self-taught when I got into games, primarily making electronic music. I grew up playing drums and saxophone, and I've been making drum videos more recently. I like making weird music. I like making experimental stuff. And this is my first time speaking to a large room of people since COVID started. So if it seems that way, that's because, yeah, I haven't experienced the public and I'm supremely jet lagged. So I'm going to blame anything that goes wrong on those two things. These are some of the projects I worked on, like Rad said, Blossom Tales, Tartarus Key is a game that's coming out next year that I worked on, Best Friend Forever. The joys of working in indie games is that if anyone you meet who doesn't work in games asks if they know anything you've worked on, the answer is no. Sorry, you don't. It's not because I want to be cool, it's just because you don't know what Fit for a King was. It was great. But I do feel lucky to have worked on some of the coolest games out there, and I've also made my own games using an engine called Bitsy and Flixy and some other things, and if you don't know what those are, I definitely encourage you to check them out, because they're very cool, very accessible, very low programming knowledge intensive, all that stuff. And before I get going, it says I have 1 minute remaining, which I assume is wrong, but I can go faster if I need to. Some disclaimers. So marginalized speakers, trans speakers, speakers of color, are often implicitly or explicitly asked to talk about their marginalizations. This is primarily because the industry is very cis, it's very het, it's a lot of white dudes, no offense to many of y'all here. But you know, that has a tendency to put people in boxes. And as a trans person, as a non-binary person, I'm not really a fan of boxes. And at the end of the day, I think it's unnecessary. So stubbornly, as also a stubborn person, I'm going to be talking about my work. But at the same time, it's hard for me to talk about my work without talking about myself, where I come from, where I live, how I live, my politics. This is not just because I'm a trans girl living in late capitalist United States, which is, I don't recommend it. But also as someone whose work, you know, touches others and interacts with the people that I work with in the industry, my friends and the fans out there. So, you know, my undergrad major was in political science, and politics are important, as I learned through that degree. So if you're someone in the audience who feels like it's actually inappropriate to talk about politics along with your work, hey, just talk about your work, girl, then I would invite you to question why you feel that way, because I think it's impossible. And then if you want to sort of hear more about me talking about the way that my identity interacts with my work, I did that a lot 2 years ago when I talked online at High Score 2020 about making queer music for Best Friend Forever. But yeah, there's the third thing I want to disclaim is that I want to invite you all to question the things that I'm saying. Being up here with my stand-up comedian microphone and my clicker and my nice recyclable water bottle thing. I'm gonna take a drink. Puts me in a weird position of authority over all y'all, and especially for maybe newer folks in the industry, it might seem like I'm some person up here who's figured everything out. And certainly I've been to a lot of talks where people say that they've figured everything out, but I'm very much still learning, and so I think it's important to just state up here that I don't know everything. And a lot of speakers, I think, don't examine their internal and implicit biases when they're giving a talk. You see this a lot in talks about success, where people don't address survivorship bias. But also, you know, my bias up here as a white person who has a certain amount of privilege in the industry, as a person who doesn't have student loans, like these things severely impact the ways in which I can work and have the privilege to work. So I think it's important to kind of state these things up front. So again, yeah, please, with everything I say, please pick and choose the parts that work for you. And if something doesn't apply to you, that's cool. And content warnings for light mentions of gore and body horror because of the things I worked on. And also some light mentions of sexual harassment. But hopefully that'll just be a quick thing and the rest of the talk will be fun. So I feel lucky to be talking at the start of the day because I get to ask the big, important, life-changing questions. And this is where I go into TED Talk mode and I start pacing around the stage, looking very serious. And my question I want to ask you is, what are we even doing here? Like, wait, what are you doing here? Like, what are you, help? Anyone? I'm jet lagged. I'm severely jet lagged, so I'm gonna need some assistance. And you know, you in the audience, you're like, oh, Josie, that's an easy question. We're at a conference. We just sit here, we just laugh, and we think about what we're gonna do later, and we think about the talks that we're gonna see. It's easy, A+, slam dunk. Let's go home. But I want to like hit you with the question that's been plaguing me specifically, which is, what do you want? And I guess that sounds really, really mean. What do you want? What do you want from me? But what do you want to get out of this weekend, I think is the question I'm trying to ask here. And so I really want to invite you all to take a sec just to think about this for yourself. We hate these kind of exercises. I've been in the audience. I hate when they're like, talk to your neighbor and see what they're all about. I'm not going to do that to you. But do take a moment to like sit and reflect. Like, what brought you here? Were you here on a scholarship? Were you invited as a student? Are you trying to find work? Are you trying to meet people? This also pads my talk, which is nice. So we're just going to sit and think for a sec. You can close your eyes if it's helpful to get into the vibe. And I want you to sort of take that nugget, that little kernel of the thing you talked about, and put it in your front pocket, and just keep it with you, and be mindful of it. And I'll tie things together in a little bit. Before we go forward, this is the last piece of introductory stuff. I swear I'll play some music at some point, but it's weird to play music at the start of your talk. Like, what do? Show your reel? It's kind of weird. So I'm going to walk you through a short timeline of my journey into getting into video games. I'm going to hopefully connect the dots between the ways that I was working as my career was developing, and how that affected the work that I made. Going back to this idea of our politics and our environment affecting our work. And then through this, hopefully I'll clarify for all of us what this idea of making music with heart even means. And as I admitted at the start of this talk, I didn't really know what that meant when they invited me to speak. Sorry, Cam. Cam was like, you can talk about whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. So fingers crossed that we'll get there and stick the landing. So the reason I asked y'all to think about what you want to get out of this weekend is I think it's really easy to go on autopilot. So starting in 2010 to 2012, I was definitely in like a very strong autopilot mode. I was going by a different name then. I wasn't out as trans then, so that's one big way I was on autopilot. But I was also on autopilot about my career. Here's a real photo of me thinking about working in marketing. In 2010, I was in undergrad, and like I said, I was a poli-sci major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought, hey, maybe I could work in marketing. That sounds great. And I know some people here probably did work in marketing for a little bit, and my apologies. But I thought it'd be collaborative. I thought it'd be creative. I thought it'd be fun. I did improv comedy in high school. Don't judge me. And I thought it'd be like that same vibe where you're riffing and doing fun bits. And yeah, I don't know. I just was kind of just going along with the flow. I worked at this place called the San Jose Group in Chicago. My undergrad was in Chicago, so in junior year, I interned here at the San Jose Group. I'm pretty sure this is a picture of the inside of the place. I sent a person in there to take photos. I worked there for the full summer. They paid me $200 USD, and 12 of those dollars went to buying a t-shirt for the corporate kickball day. So that was awful. And at the same time, I had reached out to family and friends, updating, letting them know what I was up to, and my dear friend, a friend of my parents, Mary Berry, no relation to the Great British Bake Off co-host. I know, I'm disappointed too. Wrote me this email, and she was like, hey, what if you didn't? What if you didn't do that? Please don't hate me. She was like, I worked in marketing, and I really think that you could do different stuff. Like, she knew that I was a creative person, and so in that moment when I was supremely on autopilot, thinking about needing to find a job right away, I wasn't thinking about what I wanted at all. I was just thinking about what I should do. And so this, for me, was like a helpful crowbar to like pry me out of this path I had been on. Also, at the same time, I had just wandered into the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago and saw a printmaking duo named Son and Zimmer showing off some of their work. And it was the two of them in a workshop making prints in real time, and their friends and community were there at the museum just hanging out with them. And for the first time, it was this glimpse into like what an artist scene in a community like actually looked like. And for me, I didn't really know what that meant, but there was something about that that resonated to me. And I wanted that, but I just didn't know how to get there. So I graduated college, and I was just like, well, fuck it. Like, what if I just take a hard left turn, and I moved to New York, and I just start doing music? Because in my spare time, I had been making music mostly in GarageBand, but then started to use Logic as I was graduating undergrad. I had grown up playing in friends and school bands, and so music was always a part of my life, but I didn't think it could be the thing that I was working in. I had a friend who taught me how to use samplers and how to use digital tools and synthesizers. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the EXS-24 in Logic, but it's a nightmare. I should have included a picture of it, but it's just total hellish chaos all the time. And so I was like, okay, this is good. This is working for me. Also, just quick check. Is volume okay? I don't want to like blow people's ears out, but I do want to be getting into the feed. Good? All right, thanks. And I was on autopilot again for a little while. I was playing shows under the name Visager. I was making music for kind of whatever people wanted me to do. And again, I was just in this mindset of like, I guess I should do this. I should, I don't know, DJ this thing. I should do this soundtrack for this play because I want to do music and I don't know how to get from point A to B yet, so I'll just kind of sit here for a while. Kind of like the music career waiting room. And I was having trouble with this because I was making electronic music, but then, you know, for my shows, I was having to translate it to a live set, and that would always take a long time because sending stems from Logic to Ableton, and I was using MainStage too, and it was like this whole thing, and I do not recommend it. And I was like, this sucks. And I started to feel like I was trying to work in marketing again, where I was just doing all this stuff that I felt like I needed to do, but I wasn't actually enjoying. I was releasing remixes on SoundCloud. I'm just including this because I thought it was funny. I got a bunch of copyright strikes, which I didn't know why I thought this would have been okay, but yeah, apparently SoundCloud has issues with copyright infringement, which makes sense now that I know things about how music works. I really do like this line. You've left us with no choice but to terminate your account, your sounds, your followers. It sounds like they're going to kill everyone who ever liked one of my songs, and your stats. But I talked them out of it. I sold my SoundCloud, so please don't worry about me. And then, yeah, so I said, fuck it again. And I was like, well, what if I just did only the things I wanted to do, which is make weird music, do electronic stuff, and then people can just listen to it, right? And I was like, oh, that's what a composer does. It makes so much sense now, but I don't know, it took me a long time to get there. And so in 2015, I made this album called Songs from an Unmade World. And it was like really inspired by video game tropes like Legend of Zelda, you know, pyramid levels, you got your airship level, you got your spooky Volcano Manor vibe. Something about it like really clicked. And so I'll ask the audio team to play the song here in a sec, but I think you all immediately hear what I was trying to evoke at the time. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that mix is wild, the compression. Yeah, so anyone know what I was riffing on, stealing from? Yeah, exactly. The fairy fountain music, blah, blah, blah. But I think tropes are a great place to start in your career. And I feel like a lot of composers out there have done this sort of thing where you make an album that's for a game that doesn't exist or for a movie that doesn't exist. Like, how else are you going to start your portfolio? You got to start somewhere. And people won't hire you, if they can't hear, like, some of your music. But I do think that there was something in this album that spoke to people. I mean, I put the music everywhere, right? I put it like on all the free sites that I could, like Congregate, like whatever weird hole in the internet that would take my music. And it was only actually on Free Music Archive that it got some traction, and this could have been because of my great tags, hashtag 8-bit, hashtag chiptune. But I think I would argue that there was also like a lightness and a newfound sense of joy and freedom in the music that I had found for myself. And some of that translated through, while also, yes, like weighing very heavily on inspiration from Zelda. And so that's how I got my start in games. In 2016, the devs from Blossom Tales, these two guys who make up the team at Castle Pixel, hit me up because they were working on a small Zelda-like. And they were actually using my music as some of the temp music in the game. So then they were like, well, we need to find a composer. We like this music. Let's hit her up. My portfolio was like mostly empty besides the songs from an Unmade World album. So in retrospect, it's kind of wild that they wanted to talk to me because I was, I don't know, kind of an unknown baby. But yeah, if y'all could trigger the play on this one too. This is the Overworld track from Blossom Tales 1. Okay, and then with the loop, you know, classic. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone wants to talk about Zeldas with me afterwards, I have strong opinions. I think the two ones for the Game Boy Color, the Oracle games, are the best Zeldas, and I will fight you. If you disagree, I guess that was implied. But if you want to just fight in general, we can, you know, duke it out outside. So yeah, it was a great experience for a lot of reasons. It was my first big game. It was a dream project in terms of the music I got to make. They were really excited about Link to the Past because they're a little bit older than I am. I was really excited about the Game Boy Advance Zelda sound from like Minish Cap. And so I was kind of like doing that on my own. And it led to me visiting my first big events like PAX East in 2017, and being there, I was like, oh, I can go to conferences and meet people, and like I can develop a career that way. And so that really got me off the ground going to larger events, and in a way, it just really did like jumpstart my career. I'll come back to this in a sec. There were some challenges working on it, which is first and foremost, I didn't know how to advocate for myself at all. You know, they hit me up based on music I had released for free into the Creative Commons online, and they were like, what's your rate? And I was like, well, you don't know this, but I would do this for free, which you should never, obviously, sell your labor for free. And I was like, I don't know, I'll look on Reddit and see what I should charge. And someone on Reddit was like, hey, $75 is a pretty good rate per minute for music. And I was like, that seems like a lot of money. That's more than I'm making at my day job. And so, yeah, they paid me. They were like, sure, we'll pay you $75 per minute of music, which is not even anywhere close. They like, you know, if you did the hourly rate for how much time I worked on for the 40 tracks in Blossom Tales 1, I got paid like $1 an hour, right? For full transparency, these days I work for like $1,000 USD per minute, sometimes more, sometimes less if I like the person. But I was still finding my voice as a games composer as well, in addition to figuring out how to advocate for myself. And we had some trouble figuring out exactly like what the publisher wanted stylistically, and this is another area where I was like still rough in terms of my career, where it's like I just didn't know how to get through to them about what they wanted from me, what I wanted to do in the game, and kind of meet halfway. So I'm gonna go back now and just play this clip of the trailer for a sec. If you don't mind hitting play, y'all, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. That's on my music, which was kind of wild. Like, first of all, you might have recognized that same Shrine music from my Songs from My World album, and then there was this other piece of music that they had from another composer that they just grew really attached to, and neither of those songs is in the actual game. So, needless to say, I was like a little disappointed. This was my big break. It was on Nintendo Switch in 2017, one of the first indie titles, and none of the music I had spent like a year working on had made it into the trailer. So it was a complicated feeling, right? And so while I wanted to be really happy about this big accomplishment, I was still feeling kind of awkward and feeling a little sad about where we landed. The next thing I worked on was this game called Extreme Meat Punks Forever. I wrote a cold email in 2017, which is a contentious subject in the audio community, because I know that we all love writing cold emails, and I have many people in other areas of game development tell me how audio people love writing cold emails. So if you're out there writing cold emails, just think about how and when you do it. But in this case, it worked, because Heather wrote me back a couple months later, and they were like, hey, I want to work with you on this game. And I was like, that's so weird. And they were like, hey, I'm going to be at GDC 2018. I see you're going to be there. Can we talk about it then? And so Meat Punks has a simple premise. It's a combo visual novel / action brawler about gay disasters using mech suits that are made out of meat to punch fascists off of cliffs. Just a super straightforward game. It's set in an alternate reality US. That wasn't complicated for anyone to understand. Okay, cool. But it had a lot of heart. It was a really weird and wild concept. I'm really smitten by Heather's writing and the sense of humor and the way that Heather tied humor to the horrible things that happened to the main characters in the game. And so when we finally met up at GDC 2018, they made it clear that they had big plans for what they wanted for the soundtrack. This is some of the first creative briefing I got via email, which is great. Like, I love it when devs do this stuff because they just lay out exactly what they want, what would be great if we can accomplish, what we can do if we have time. But it was clear right away that this wasn't going to be like a regular soundtrack, because you can see here that Heather was asking for folk punk music, and then also maybe like sort of like a Western vibe, and then like soundscapes and strings and orchestral stuff, and then punk rock with bass features, and then darkwave goth music, right? And so I had just worked on a chiptune game, and I have done some of these things before because I grew up playing drums, I grew up playing in bands. Shout out to my high school band Blue Horse Explosion, which was jazz metal fusion, as you do in high school. And so I didn't know if I could do this, and I said what you're not supposed to say, which is, I don't know. She was like, do you think you can do this? And I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. And I didn't know how much of a challenge it was gonna be, but figuring out how to tie all these disparate elements together into one soundtrack and sort of take the bleeding heart core of the game and compact it into some musical ideas ended up being a really amazing thing to grow from. So I'm going to play this clip in a sec. These are the fight themes, the combat music from the game, and the sections where you're doing this like kind of like 2D arcade fighting thing. And you'll hear how, because the player could switch between characters at any time, we had to take the 4 distinct genres that represented each of the 4 characters and tie them into one song that could crossfade at any moment, classic, dynamic music stuff. And I thought that this was a really fun way to explore the idea of these characters coming from disparate backgrounds, but yet coming together for a common cause. So here's a clip of that. Thanks. Please don't judge my automation curves. I drew them really quickly. Also, shout out to my friend M. Gore, who's played bass at the beginning of that stuff. When they sent me that file of them playing, I was like, this is 2 takes put together, right? And they were like, no, I did that at the same time. And I was like, what? It's so wild to me. But yeah, so in contrast to Blossom Tales, which I really am on good terms with the devs from Blossom Tales and the publishers, there was a lot that just clicked a lot more for me when I worked on Meat Punks. For one, I was given a really steep challenge, but I was also given a lot of trust alongside it. And I really valued the trust. And in some ways, I didn't feel like I deserved it, but I really think that Heather was very forward for investing that trust in someone that that they had just met. And Heather at the time was still in undergrad in their program in LA, which is like so wild. I felt valued for my time. I felt valued for my personality. I felt valued for my labor. I was like, yo, Heather, like I charged way not enough money on my last soundtrack, so I'm gonna have to like up my rate, probably like 4-fold at least, and charge you $300 per minute when I worked on this in 2018. And that was outside of their budget, but we actually ended up making the budget work through skill trading, where they were teaching me programming lessons in exchange for some of my time as composing. And so even though we were on a small budget, this idea of skill trading is something you can always explore if you want to find ways to make weird small budgets for small indie stuff work. I talked about this at GDC 2018 actually, or 2019. It was the first time in games where I felt like I hit that feeling of longing for an artistic and creative space that I had seen all those years ago with the Sonnenzimmer print show at that museum in Chicago. And so I was feeling like I was riding really high, and 2018 came around and I decided to go to grad school. And I wasn't sure if this was something I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't have to like go severely into debt for it. Because my parents were able to help me with some of it, and I didn't have to move because my program was in New York. But here's how I felt about it, which is to say, not great. There was a lot of stuff. Like I said, my background was very self-taught. You know, I'd taken drum lessons and done jazz band and stuff in school, but I didn't have like a formal music education background. I didn't know theory super well. I wrote music primarily by ear, and so I really wanted to give myself a more solid foundation in classical music and orchestral techniques, in basic theory, learning about Neapolitan seconds, which is so relevant all the time. And I had some really good professors, but also at the same time, I found it was a very isolating experience. My program, the name of my program was scoring for film and multimedia, excuse me, and games was like an add-on, sort of inside that, and multimedia. And I was one of the few people in my program who cared passionately about games. And so in many ways, it felt like much of what the program offered just wasn't for me. And so I kind of knew that going in, but I didn't really get it until I got there, and everyone was talking about film music and John Williams and Giacchino, and like that stuff is great, but it's not like why I love music, you know? But I also had to deal with a lot of other unpleasant things like transphobia. I had a mixing professor who decided to refer to our class the whole time as gentleman, even though I told him that I was not a gentleman. And that was really shitty. There were sexist visiting artists. There were artists who came and talked about how many sleepless nights they'd worked to get into the industry, which I think is a really toxic and unhealthy thing to tell young students, especially when the program wasn't talking about advocating for yourself or what your rate should be or negotiating contracts. There was sexual harassment inside the department that was like kind of like an open secret, which was really gross. So yeah, I would say that all those things made it a hard place to feel like I was learning in a healthy way for me. In addition, I felt like other people's work was being put on a higher pedestal than mine, which was partially probably some of the film games tension. But also, I think some of the like cis male professors just didn't know how to interact with me and didn't know how to advocate for me. And I felt like I had done a lot of cool stuff at that time. So it was disconcerting and it was off-putting. We had a visiting speaker from a US-based public rights organization who I asked, I was like, hey, what can I do to like get more into games? And she was like, well, you could attend GDC. And I was like, well, I'm speaking at GDC. And I just felt like I was being seen at a different level than I knew where I was at. And I'm sure many people in the room have had similar experiences, and if you have, I'm sorry, because it's not fun. It was disorienting, and I found myself trying to figure out whose expectations was I trying to meet. And it was hard because I came to the program feeling really strong about what I wanted and very clear about where I wanted to head. And then this kind of, I think, threw everything into a bit of doubt for me. I started to lose touch with the things that made me enjoy making music. I'd also been working so much between classes and freelancing and trying to catch up on all the theory that I didn't know because I was in remedial classes, learning Theory 1 and Theory 2 stuff. And all of this like raw output that I was working through started to burn me out from both ends. And I felt like I had effectively compartmentalized the parts of myself that were making music from the parts of myself that actually enjoyed making music. And that was really scary and disheartening for me. And so there were a couple things that kind of brought me back from what was all in all a kind of rough experience. One was this amazing article from my friend Marina Kataka. Marina is one of the developers of Analgesia Productions, the people that made Anodyne, Anodyne 2. She's really great, and I definitely encourage y'all to read this article. It talks about a lot of things, but it talks about sucking as praxis or sucking as self-care. And she writes, professional artistry as the capacity to maintain the shared illusion that there are indisputable measures of beauty and worth. When you allow the illusion to fail, often against your will, 1, capitalist powers will be disappointed in their inability to wield you with proper efficiency, and 2, fellow small creators will be heartened because you bypassed the illusion and still offered something worthy. Failure in a backward system can be strength. Growing as an artist could be a gloriously paradoxical affair. Yeah, give it up for Marina. This article for me is like a bit of like a very grounding piece of writing that I come back to all the time. And I've ended up just showing it in every talk I've given since I read it. In this vein of sucking as praxis, like jamming with friends outside of school, getting back to that Blue Horse Explosion experience from high school, like was a nice reminder that like music didn't have to be good, it didn't have to be technically complicated, it didn't have to have good theory, it didn't have to be in tune to be fun. And it was a lesson that I had forgotten and was not taught at all in grad school, and so it was nice to return to that. So in 2020, as I was getting ready to graduate from my program, and also experiencing the joys of COVID for the first time, my friend Dave Makes on Twitter, who had contributed a little bit to Meat Punks, but I didn't know super well, hit me up to work on this puzzle game, Mixolumia, which is a Tetris Effect-like puzzle arcade game with music at its heart, similar to Tetris Effect. There's a picture of me and Dave. Dave was the main programmer and visionary for the game. Jasmine, who's up here in the bleachers, also did music along with me and Dave and contributed to the game, but unfortunately we've never all been in the same place at the same time, so here's our team photo. We all got to refine Dave's audio system because Dave had been building this custom audio system using GameMaker and JSON, and it was super cool. I was like, can we use Fmod? And Dave was like, no, sorry, we're way past that point. Yeah, it was a breath of fresh air for a number of reasons. One, and I think you're starting to see a theme here, that Dave was very clear about giving full creative control to Jasmine and I for our tracks. There was this sense of trust again that was really important. Team Audio was given 20% of the total rev share for the game, split among Jasmine and I, in addition to being paid some amounts up front for our music. And that's like a very cool progressive thing that you almost never see in any game. And a lot of credit to Dave for, I don't know, just being so forward about compensating artists. And, you know, realizing that music was a huge part of this game and that we deserve to be valued accordingly. And Dave was also including us on creative decisions about where the game was headed, not just in terms of internally, but also like where you wanted to release. And we actually just released on Switch a couple years later, so it was great. And so I made 2 tracks for this game. They were called sound packs because you can sort of insert the music in and out to customize your experience. The way the music system works is each sound pack has like a first, second, and third section. And so this clip I'm about to show is my track Summer Shower, where you'll hear the first and the third sections. But I wanted to go back to like what my heart wanted. Like, what did I want out of this experience? And it was a moment where I had full creative control, which is honestly rare, but hopefully something y'all either have or will get to experience with your work. And I wanted, when I listened to my heart, I was like, hey, what do you want? I wanted to make something soothing, something personal, something tangible, something that was a bit of a healing balm after a turbulent 2 years. And so I made this sound pack about my experiences playing in the rain, growing up in the forests in upstate New York when I was a kid. So here's that. Sorry, it's a little quiet. Rip the frame rate, sorry. Thanks. Something I'm really proud about in the implementation there is that when you hit combos in Mixolumia using my sound pack, you get peals of thunder when the combos connect, and you know, I just love that shit. Okay, taking that sort of like really lovely experience, I ended up then working on my next project, which was this game Freshly Frosted. And that sense of freedom, I think, carried into it, where I felt like I could still kind of just do the things I wanted to do and not feel like I needed to be doing things I feel like I should do. And that sentence didn't make any sense, but you know, the jet lag, right? So I started working on this in 2020, and this actually, it just came out this past year because they were in development for a little bit. And in contrast to Mixolumia, where the game could adapt around whatever the music I wanted to be, this one had very specific needs. And so in game, like, see, these are some of the requirements. We had dynamic music switching between on-off states for the puzzles. So you had your like puzzling mode for when you're solving your solutions. And then you had the more active mode where you're testing them out, and then the music would kind of kick into gear and be a little more dancey, a little more bumping. Each of the 12 boxes songs had to be at exactly 80 BPM, which I don't know if anyone's ever worked with a requirement like this, but it's fun, where you have to use the same tempo for everything. Also, every snare hit had to be at least on a 2 and a 4, because when they hired me, they were like, we don't need sound design, the music will cover it, because the snare will be timing with the closings of the donut presses, as you can see in the GIF. We added sound design later. As a fun joke to myself, I made the title screen 81 BPM, really just breaking out of the mold. So here's a clip of kind of like how that looks in game, and then I can talk more about it. You're gonna have to trust me that the things line up with the snare, right? Skip ahead here. Thank you. Yeah. How dare you think about applauding? This will be noted. Josie will remember this. So these needs could have been constraining, but there's like an adage about how constraints can breed creativity, right? But also constraints can just be constraining. Like that's also fine too. But despite everything being in 80 BPM, like I ended up writing the songs in weird time signatures to break out of that mold. Really anything to break up like this kind of like box, right? I took inspiration from seminal Dream Theater album Octavarium. Any Dream Theater fans in chat? Yeah? Nice. People with real taste back here. This album is amazing. It's a seamless album that is based on the drummer's experience going through Alcoholics Anonymous, which is like a 12-step program. And each song is in one of 8 keys, and the album cycles all the way back through the octave, basically, hence Octavarium. When I realized that, when I was 16, I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, wait, I could do that too with the donut music game. I can make every world a different key, and the player will feel like they're progressing through this musical landscape. As you can see, I started on F sharp and then went to C sharp, and these are all 5th apart, and then it works perfectly, and then it'll cycle back around because there are 12 boxes of donuts, like a dozen. I was mad with power. And if I had been like a little, I came across this idea like a month into working on it. Obviously, in retrospect, I would have started on D for donut, right? But we don't live in a perfect world. And then once every song was a 5th apart, I realized, oh, I could make a seamless album too. I could just put every song next to each other, write modulations from song to song. It's easy. It'll be fine. Did I need to do this? No fucking way. This took so much extra work, I can't even tell you what a pain in the ass I caused myself. But the important thing is, oh, sorry, I went too far. The important thing is that they paid me enough money, right? I got paid $1,000 per minute on this game, on this indie game. This was an indie team, small Seattle-based studio. And because I was paid enough, I could spend all that extra time I had working on this project doing goofy shit like this. But I was only able to do that because I learned how to advocate for myself, right, in the negotiation process. And they were like, hey, this is like a little bit above our budget, but we understand what you're saying about how complex the dynamic needs are of this game. I was like, basically, I have to compose every song twice. And we did actually count the 2 versions as different complete songs, so that was nice. So that, for me, was like a good lesson in advocating for myself, leading towards doing more fun stuff at the end of the process. And so my timeline ends for now here in 2022, where I just this past summer released Blossom Tales 2 with a different publisher. I have a clip here, and I'm probably just going to skip it for time, but you can go look this up on Twitter or wherever and hear some of the music there. But I'm really proud of the work that I did. And I was paid a lot better, again, knowing how to advocate for myself. I felt more confident about my writing. We didn't have those similar tensions this time working around. It was the same dev team, the Castle Pixel guys, but they were working with a different publisher. And basically every track I wrote got approved right away, which is really nice. You don't have to do any revisions, which if you have that opportunity, I recommend taking it. And I was able to strongly weave motifs throughout the game, and this time only my music was used in the trailer, which was a relief. So yeah, I'll play a little clip. You mind playing it for a second? Thanks, guys. Okay, you only get one verse, sorry. You only get one verse and you'll appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. The audience loves it when I talk down to them. So when I pitched this talk, I said I wanted to talk about writing music with heart, right? And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but in the back of my head, well, I was like, I'll talk about things like using motifs to carry the heart of the game. I'll talk about things like interesting approaches, like I did for Freshly Frosted or for Mixolumia. But hopefully it's clear by now that I think there's more to it than that. And so I asked y'all at the start of this talk, which now feels like 18 hours ago, but that's probably some of the jet lag speaking still. I asked y'all earlier, so it's only fair to ask myself, what do I want? What do I want out of today? What do I want out of this weekend? What do I want going forward as a composer working in this industry? So here are some of the things that I want. I want my music to make people smile or laugh or miss someone. I want a house with a studio where I can have a mic'd up drum kit all the time, which is easier said than done in New York. I want to work in an industry where I don't have to kill myself to make a sustainable living. I want to protect my body from repetitive stress injuries and from chronic pain. I want to see my friends have long and healthy careers in games or wherever they end up. I want to be surrounded by people who come from different experiences and different backgrounds than me. I want to attend events without worrying about the specters of people who have harmed my friends, haunting them. And I want to hold on to the joy of making music that made me want to be a musician in the first place. So at the end of all of this, making music with heart for me means making music without compromising. I think early on in my career, I felt like I was compromising a lot. And my journey, as hopefully you've seen, has been learning how to compromise less as I go on. But there's no ever a guarantee that I'll fully get there. Sometimes I still have a hard time advocating for myself in the negotiation process, or there'll be an opportunity that seems cool and I want to do it, but they just can't quite pay me enough, and I don't know how to sort of make those two things meet in the middle. I'm dealing with more hand and wrist pain this year, and I'm trying to be better about wrist exercises, and we don't talk about, wrist exercises enough, I think, in audio, but it's really something that people should do. But yeah, all these things are to say that I'm still working on it. And so it's my hope today that you can take some of this reflection forward with you into the rest of the weekend. You can think about what your heart wants and what your heart needs, and that you can be more mindful of the hearts of those around you as well. Thanks.
Is my mic on? It's not yet. I'm talking. There it is. Slowly faded up. Nice and gentle. Love it. Not blasting people with my voice. What a way to open our 2 days this weekend. That was such a beautiful chat, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thanks, Rad. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, now it's Q&A time. So if you haven't gotten to ask your questions yet,
I'm ready.
You're like, I'm ready. Let's do
go,
this.
Rad.
All right, kids. If you haven't gotten to submit your questions yet and you would like to, remember you can just scan the QR code on the back of your lanyard.
This is so fancy.
Yeah, I know. They have a lot
God.
of good tech here. I mean, look at these projections.
I know, there's two of them.
We're going to have faces on them later.
Usually it's like I have to do with the projector standing right in my face.
Yeah, scan the QR code, then go to menu, then go to Q&A, and then just go ham. Ask whatever you like. If you are joining us via the live stream, I don't actually know where you'll find Slido. I'm sure there was a link sent to you that you can find. It's on the screen. It's on the screen right there. Thank you. All right, well, we do have some questions that have come in.
All right, hit me.
So, how do we deal with saturation in the industry when seeking a career trying to be faithful to our creative desires?
Yeah, let me know if you're in the audience and you ask this question, because I would love to talk to you directly. Okay, awesome. Hi, what's your name? Artemis? Cool, that's a sick name. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. And my GDC talk from 20 whenever is actually on my Twitch, which I don't use anymore, but I gave it again there and archived it. And there's I talk a lot in that talk about the survival, the scarcity versus subsistence mindset. And a lot of messaging in the industry tells us that jobs are infrequent and hard to come by, and that you need to devalue yourself and your work in order to start working. And I disagree with that. I think it's a lot more valuable for your career in the long term to focus on just making work that you like, making a portfolio and building that, and doing that until you find the clients who are ready to value your time. Because if you end up working on a bad project, like my experience in grad school, it'll suck out way more energy than you are ready to give probably. and you'll end up burning out more early in your career, and you'll just waste time doing stuff for people who aren't worth your time. So that doesn't quite answer like the saturation question, but one thing that I was thinking about was, I feel like there's a ton of composers out there who come from this like traditional music background where they went to music undergrad and they do orchestral stuff, and that wasn't my background. And that could have been seen as something that set me behind other people, but I chose to focus on making weird music and experimental music with the skill set I had, which was like this like, kind of like hybrid electronic band background. And I think that positioned me in the industry, not to use weird branding terms, but I think that positioned me in the industry in a more unique spot rather than trying to claw my way up through all the other people who were trying to do orchestral stuff. So I guess I would say focus on working with nice people, focus on your music, focus on what makes your music authentically you and uniquely you, if you're talking about music. Some of the best advice I ever got was just be the loudest version of yourself you know how to be. Not like volume-wise, of course, but like in terms of like who you are as a person. Because if you're able to broadcast that very strongly, it'll sort of flag down the people who want to be on board with what you're about. And it'll push away the people who don't give a shit about you, or, you know, in my case, are transphobic. Like, I don't want to be anywhere near those people. So I talk about being trans, and I'm open about it because I want them to go the fuck away. And sort of same thing with my music. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
I love how much you talk about valuing yourself and how important it is, yeah, to not compromise on that and to say, my work is worth being paid for, you know, my values and what I want to make is worth being listened to. And I don't know what you think about this, but I'm kind of the opinion that if everybody does that, it becomes the norm. It's when people are undervaluing themselves that also becomes really difficult because, you know, other people who are in hiring positions might go, oh, well, why aren't you doing this for free? That should be what I get.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you see this like with sound tests, you know, as just a very small microcosm of how this plays out in the industry, where a lot of bigger studios, if they want to hire you, ask you to do a sound test. And you're like, well, can you pay me for my time to do this test? And some of them are like, no, we're not going to pay you. Like, I worked for Jackbox, and they did not pay me for a sound test. And I decided to do it anyway, and I regret it. So I've made it since then my policy to only do sound tests at the rate that I make music for, because that's what my time is worth. In grad school, they talked a lot about like a race to the bottom, and I'm sure some other folks have heard this phrase, and I think it's like very pessimistic. It makes it feel like we have no control over what happens in the industry around us. But if we are able to talk about each other with our rates, talk to each other about our rates, which I do with my friends all the time. Shout out to Jasmine and Neha, who are going to be talking about some rate stuff later, I'm sure. And we know what we're charging, we can make sure that we're not like leaving anyone in positions where they feel like they need to charge too little or don't know how much to charge. So I think that sort of transparency and the conversations around money stuff especially are super important to have.
How important do you think learning implementation was to getting the opportunities that you did?
Yeah, is that person here? Implementation fans?
Over there.
Back there? Hey, what's your name? What? Toby? Toby, hey. Not Toby Doe, are you? What's your last name? Oh, okay, sorry. I'm just wondering. Sorry, Toby, I'll stand not where the pillar's blocking me. It is definitely helpful. I think you should only like start going down that route if you feel passionate about it. Again, not because you feel like you should do it. Plenty of the games that I worked on, Blossom Tales, like I was just sending off raw game loops and they were putting them in the game. So there are definitely still games out there that just care about having loops. But definitely as I've gone on in my career, like those skills have been super relevant. So I think just learning FMOD or learning Wise is a good way to get your head around composing in new ways, you know, for dynamic stuff. So it's good practice for sure. I think the best resource out there for FMOD stuff is the 4-hour Celeste FMOD project walkthrough that the Power Up guys did. It's just really great because you get to see everything right away with examples. It is 4 hours long of Kevin Regami talking about audio, which is a lot, but it was really helpful for me. And then, yeah, just picking a thing, messing around with it, and starting to get comfortable with it, I think are the ways to go.
All right, I'm going to ask you to be our collective physio amateur physio for a second.
Okay.
What is your favorite wrist exercise?
Okay, so here's what I do. I'll do this. Can you hold my mic for me?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thanks, Brad. Okay, I mean, and I'm still learning this, right? Like, I started having wrist pain, like, I've had it before, but it's like gone away. And then I got Elden Ring, and then played for 100+ hours, and then was also working, and COVID, I think, finally caught up with like, how much screen time I'd been having. So, you know, you can start, if everyone wants to practice along with me, yeah, this is great. You do some bends, so like work on these guys, you know, and then work on going forward.
That's so like subtle.
And then squeezing.
Oh,
yeah, and like, you know, you can do this at the start of your day, and then there's also ones that, you know, they recommend you do like every hour, every 2 hours. Like at least every hour you should be shaking out your hands, right, while you're working. You know, classic. But yeah, so going through like these like little motions and squeezing. Bending all of your fingers back slowly and holding it. Yeah, practice. I see some people gave up already. I believe in you. It's okay. It's okay to look silly.
They're like, we're not working on screens today, so I don't have to.
I know. Yeah, I really should be better about doing this every day. Bending your wrist back like this. Doing pronation, so side to side, like this. Standing against the wall, pressing your hands. Pressing your wrist down like this.
I quite like the one where you get like a table or a surface and you go like that. And it's too tall for me, so I can't do it. But you can use that to kind of bend it as
Definitely,
well.
pressing it that way. Getting a tennis ball or a squeeze ball and just holding those. So all these things that are just helpful preventative stuff, because you don't want to end up in a situation where your wrist is hurting and you can't work anymore, right? That would suck.
Oh, the breadth of advice we give here at high school. All right, you spoke a lot about the negotiation process. What are the main things that you include about yourself for the negotiation process and advocation?
Okay, for negotiating, I think, is that person here also? Negotiators? No? Okay, online. I see you out there. I don't know where the camera is.
It's right up the back there.
Okay, I see you. I usually start, I'm like, this is how I do my process. I'm like, hey, my center rate for composing is $1,000 USD per minute. Now, that can be more expensive if you have complicated music needs, like dynamic music or extremely orchestral stuff that's going to have a lot of layers. But if your stuff is simpler, like let's say just piano or minimalist synths and stuff, I can maybe reduce my rate. Or alternatively, if you need a lot of music from me, I can probably give you like a bulk rate and work for maybe $900 per minute or $800 if it's whatever. And then you can talk about licensing, if it's going to be an exclusive license versus a non-exclusive license. If it's a buyout where they're just going to own my music forever, I was always told to triple my rates, and I stand by that. There's no reason that anyone should want to buy out in the industry, but as more stakeholders own publishing companies that want to hire indie composers, that's going to be more common, and I think we should push back against that. But yeah, usually the exclusive licensing model is what works for everyone. So, you know, they are licensed the right to use my music in the game, but I retain all the rights to sales. And then sometimes if we're putting a deluxe album on Steam, we'll talk about negotiating a cut of those soundtrack sales back to them just for managing that on the back end and taking the time to pay me out of that money and do all that math and stuff.
Yeah. Is there a game genre you haven't written music for yet that you'd really like to in future?
Zydeco, which is like like Southern America, like Louisiana music. I got to make one Zydeco track for a friend, and it was really fun. I love accordion. So, you know, get some accordion, get some horns, like trombones in there, a little washboard.
Little cowboy game?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm from the North, so I'm a dirty Yankee in the United States, so maybe that's like a little offensive to folks who are actually from Louisiana, but yeah, I've just done a lot of weird stuff, so I feel lucky in that respect for sure.
What is your favorite soundtrack in recent years?
Oh God, that's so hard. I really resonated with the soundtrack to Signs of the Sojourner. Steve Pardo was the composer on that, and it's got like a really cool, very like tangible score with like bass clarinet and guitars and like live percussion. I think his wife plays flute on the soundtrack, and it's really cool. What else have I been listening to lately? I'm gonna space out. I was listening a lot to actually Jasmine's recent album, which was not technically a soundtrack, but it was one of those things where it's a soundtrack for an anime that doesn't exist. It's called Journey to the Sun. It's very good. And Jasmine, you wrote that in like 2 weeks? Okay, so you wrote like a 20-track full album in like a month, and it's really cool and really sick. And so that draws like a lot of elements from like traditional like anime soundtracks and stuff like that. It's super exciting. So I was listening to that a lot recently as well.
We have time for one more, so I'm going to go with a fun one. Okay. Where did you get your top from?
I think I'm embarrassed because I think it's from Shein, which is like really not, it doesn't have good like clothing practices. But if you see me around,
it's quality for Shein though. Like the embroidery's nice.
I know it's nice, right?
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I bought my jacket. If you see me around my cool worm jacket later, I got that from a store.
Worm jacket.
Yeah, with a weird design on it. But
I'm a big worm fan, so I want to see that later.
We got that yesterday. Me and Jasmine and Neha were walking around. I bought this shirt. It's an Australian designer, so I'm glad to be repping some local folks.
Good. We'll be talking about that later.
Let's.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
all
so
of
much.
your amazing knowledge.
I do want to say real quick, I have some nail polish on me, so if you want to come meet me later and get like a nail or a couple nails painted, I'll paint your nails for you. I only have this color, so we'll be matching. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.